My dear soul warriors, how are you? I hope this video finds you well. So in this video, what I'm going to do is basically summarize what I've been saying in the concubines video and just pick out some points that I thought would be really well worth mentioning in a sort of follow-up video, because I've seen that some people watch that video and maybe they got lost in the details of it. And sometimes when you go into detail a lot, then the core message can get lost. So I thought this might be helpful for you if you've watched that video and you got a little confused or anything like that. I hope that this will be easier to follow, because basically I'm just chatting to you in this video and I'm just going to tell you, a few key things that I think should be the take-home messages. So basically, concubines in Islam, what are they? Or just concubines in general? Concubines historically were captives of war, and they would be used as slaves or for personal gains, personal use. And often, the word concubine is associated with the people that use them for physical intimacy. And so they were basically exploited. So, this practice, from what I understand, it was a pre-Islamic practice, and it's historically known to have been used in multiple cultures. It's not just in the, pre-Islamic Arabia that this practice happened, but in multiple cultures. So, what does the Quran say about this? Is this something that Allah would promote? Now, the thing is that I was talking about Yusuf alayhi Islam in previous videos, wasn't I? And I was talking about how he fought for his chastity. He was put in a situation where he was tempted and he fought against that temptation, and he remembered Allah and he maintained his chastity. Now, he was a prophet of Allah, and all of the other prophets were righteous examples, excellent examples of people that Allah has created and sent down for as a role model for all of humanity, right? So the same thing goes for the last prophet, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was also a role model, an example for all of the people, and he embodied the same values that Yusuf demonstrated, that he embodied, and the same as all of the other prophets. The message was consistent over time, and there isn't a single example in the Quran where any of the prophets misused people, where they treated them as beneath themselves, often these prophets were in situations where they themselves were suffering. Like, for example, Yusuf alayhi salam was himself a slave at some point in his life. When he was kidnapped from the well that he was thrown into by his brothers, he was taken as a slave by people that found him in that well. So, this is the thing, that we can't just assume things that are not true, and we can't just listen to external sources that may be evil or may be ill-informed and assume that they have precedence over the Quranic word. The Quranic word is consistent. There aren't inconsistencies in it. So if you find inconsistencies within the Quran, that's not coming from the Quran, that's coming from the people that are interpreting it for you on your behalf, or those people that are influencing it with so-called historical evidence that's not even true. And the thing is that sometimes there can be some really influential organizations, people that will peddle their narrative and make it seem like fact. And we saw this a lot even in recent times, like when the COVID debacle happened, and there were authoritative sources providing so-called evidence that true scientists with a critical eye could pick apart in a second, but the majority of the people followed it and they thought that that was true evidence at the time, that what the narrative is saying is true, and that jabs are going to save you and all of this and that. So we can't just trust what authorities, so-called authorities, say. We have to trust what is presenting itself and proving itself to be the truth. So for me, that is the Quran. I know that the Quran has the ultimate truth in it. And if I read something in it that doesn't really make sense to me, that doesn't add up, then I will pick it apart so that I can understand what the core messaging actually is, because often it's a translation that is incorrect. It's not the core wording itself, it's the person who's interpreted it for you, who's presented you with the translation that you find that has made a mistake. And remember, they're just people that are translating it. Yes, I'm sure they have good intentions, but they were very much swayed by the culture that they lived in when they were interpreting it. So we can't just assume that the way that they interpret the Quran and the way that they present it to you as a translation is fully correct. Same goes for historical sources. We don't know truly what was happening at that time. No one can go and confirm that. And we don't know what pressures or what political situations happened at that time. Look, with COVID, the whole world was united, right? All the governments around the world were united in a single narrative, and those that didn't conform, they suffered. So there were a few presidents in Africa that disappeared off the scene because they didn't agree with the jab rollout at that time. So this is what happens. Even if you look into the history of the medical industry, you will see like how universities stopped teaching the traditional medicine that they used to teach. Over the course of just a few decades, they had to completely revamp that entire like medical education that they were teaching to medical students because of a political push, a very powerful political push. So we've got to bear that in mind. And what does Allah actually say in the Quran? What does He say? He says that no single soul is superior to another soul except through taqwa, except through piety. So if we assume the narrative that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and that Allah had allowed and permitted people to use captives for their personal gratification, then that basically means that the captive is inferior to the people at that time who were using them. And that's not true. That's inconsistent with the Quranic message. Allah is saying that no one is inferior. And even when you address the ignorant and the people that are not very nice to you, then say salam to them, say peace to them, and then, just pass by them with dignity. Where's the dignity in using someone as a concubine in that way? There's no dignity in that. And that's not something that's promoted in the Quran at all. If you look at the other messaging in there about chastity, about marrying the single amongst you, and I did talk about how even those that were in that group of right hands possessed, that it was permissible to marry them, but obviously with their permission, with their guardian's permission. And there were certain conditions there as well, that they had to be treated with dignity. So it was allowed to marry them, but it had to be done in dignity. And then as soon as they were married, they had the same marital rights as everybody else, as those that were free believers and were marrying other free believers. They still had the same rights. So it's really important to remember that Allah promotes dignity. He promotes chastity amongst all people. Obviously, when you're married, it's different, but you have a full relationship, obviously, with the person that you married. But for those that are not married, they have to remain chaste. And there's no chastity if someone is getting together with someone who's unmarried just because they have authority over them. I mean, that promotes everything unhealthy, and obviously it's dirty practice. And this was something that predated Islam. If those historical sources are correct and this thing happened, which it probably did. So I'm not doubting that part, but I am doubting the part where the prophets could have ever promoted this, because it is totally, completely inconsistent with all of the values and virtues that are taught in the Quran. It is totally inconsistent. Why would Allah emphasize the importance of chastity and say the pure for the pure, and that He created soulmates from amongst yourselves? He says that He made your soul, and from it He made it soulmate. Why would He promote this sort of single partnership of a man and a woman, right? If at the same time he was promoting something like this practice. He doesn't even give examples of polygamy in the Quran. Like, there are no clear examples of him promoting it or encouraging it. So, I mean, if you have any doubts about that, you can watch my video as well where I've talked about polygamy. But you know, there's no encouragement there. Now, you might find in other scriptures, like in the Bible and Torah, I believe that there are some clear examples of polygamy in there. But even there, like even that is marriage, right? Polygamy is marriage. But in those scriptures, they have some evidence of that. But even the Jews and Christians don't take that practice seriously today. Like, you don't hear about Jews and Christians marrying multiple people. But here, when we're talking about concubines, we're not even talking about marriage. We're talking about something outside of marriage. And that is totally 100% inconsistent with the messaging of the Quran. And this is why I say that if you use reasoning, and Allah encourages us to use reasoning, then this whole argument can be torn apart. You don't even need to look at historical sources. And if you're going to trust historical sources over what the Quran says, then it means that you are taking the historical sources as your God and not the word of Allah, because that is totally clashing and contradicting with the Quranic message. Now, if you do want to go into more detail based on what I've said in this video, then please watch that video that I made, because I have gone into a lot of detail about this. But, you know, just know that, like, I wouldn't be making these videos with the certainty that I'm making them if I wasn't 100% certain. And I've done like a lot of thought and research and thinking and reasoning and discussions with people about this. And that's when I realized that the interpretations that are out there are totally wrong. And that's why it feels wrong as well. The reason why it feels wrong, and the reason why it feels dirty and filthy, like something that you don't want to associate with, is because it's not true. Like, when I read the examples of the prophets, I think, wow, I'm so inspired. Like, they were such incredible people, and they cared so much about their communities, society, humanity at large. They cared about everybody. They treated others so well. They treated them with such kindness, and they were such humble people. They never misused anyone. They were so trusted, and they were just beautiful people inside out. Now, if you think of any beautiful person that you know of, and you know someone like that who's beautiful inside out, could you ever imagine them taking advantage of someone else in this way? Like, no. And if this practice really was true, then can you imagine like the level of exploitation there, the diseases that could be passed, how upset it would make family members as well, like if those people had children. So like, you know, if this slave was, or this concubine was living in a family where there was like an established nuclear family, and then what would the children think? What sort of example was that for the kids? It's just, yeah, it's totally inconsistent is what I'm trying to say with the virtues and values that are taught about in the Quran. And when you have a really deep connection to the Quran and you remove all the filth from your life, then you will come to the same understanding that I come to, and I'm certain of that, because you have to have a purity of mind, heart, and soul to be able to recognize when there is a clear lie. You do need to have that. I truly do believe that, because if your own mind is corrupted, then, you know, you're going to be very easily persuaded by others that have a similarly corrupted mind. No offense, I'm just stating what I think is true, you know? So I hope this helps. I didn't go into all the details here, but just know that like Allah promotes certain things which he didn't have to say. He didn't have to say single people marry single people. He didn't have to say that. He didn't have to say about the soulmate stuff. He didn't have to say that you know, that these are the groups of people that you can marry. He didn't have to talk about all of the examples of the prophets and their piety and how they evaded seduction and how none of them did zina or anything like that. So he didn't have to mention and make clear all of these examples if he was promoting exploitation of war captives. It doesn't add up because it's not true that those people were taken as captives and used in that way after Islam was rolled out. Like, that's not true at all. So I hope this video helps clarify that topic. And please go back and watch that video again, because now you've got sort of a glimpse of this view, and now it might help to go into the details and learn more about the details. And if you like this video, please give it a like, feel free to share it, and subscribe to my channel for more content. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care.